Welcome to Discover Indie Film. I'm your host, Jeff Howard, and I'm really excited to have Greg Berman with me. Hey, Greg.
Hello.
All right, so we are in the same room, which I know isn't that big a deal, but nowadays, like more than half of these are by Zoom, so it's always nice to have someone, a face to look at that's not on a screen. So Greg and I are here because his film, She Used to Laugh. This is going to take me a minute or two to talk about this film because I kind of have a fun history with it personally, which is you shot the film and you submitted it to Film Invasion Los Angeles for the 2021 festival. If you can't do the math, dear listener, June 2021, we weren't quite over COVID. Not everyone was, well, we were learning that not everyone was going to get vaccinated and this and that. So that festival, sadly, was a virtual-only festival. But I got to meet Greg at the mixer because we actually did an outdoor in-person mixer. And I'm very happy to say that She Used to Laugh took home the award for Outstanding Short Film Drama and Outstanding Screenplay Drama for Greg as the writer. By the way, if I didn't make it clear, writer, director, producer, lead actor, you probably did craft services. This was yeah. Truly, you obviously had great collaborators and a great co-star, but also just, this was a passion project from one person to the world.
100%.
And it is excellent. Like I said, outstanding short film, outstanding screenplay. And then, and I remember you told me, and then at the Sherman Oaks Film Festival in 2021, Greg submitted it to Sherman Oaks Film Festival, which happens to be the same team that does Film Invasion LA, and you didn't realize it was the same team.
No idea.
So last November, we got to do the theatrical LA premiere of She Used to Laugh. And I think you didn't know it was me till you came to the theater that day.
100%.
So funny.
I recognized that guy.
I was like, it's funny because when people submit to both and like, obviously, we had done like a Zoom Q&A, I think, for the virtual festival. And I'm like, well, he knows I love him in his film, so he's probably just submitting because he knows his shoe-in. But no. So it was really great to see that film with an audience in a theater on a nice 25-foot screen. So that is my personal history with She Used to Laugh. And I suppose I should just throw it to you right away. I warned you that I was just going to ask about your inspirations. I know from talking to you that you started with stand-up. The film focuses on a stand-up. And there's so many great things to say about the film, but the podcast is actually more about you than the film. I do recommend if people want to hear a really good interview or a really good Q&A, you can go to the filminvasionla.com site or the ShermanOaksFilmFestival.com site. And those, the one in the theater and the one that was virtual, you can watch it because that's when we go real deep about the film. But anyway, super talented person, wrote, directed, produced, performed. You performed stand-up on film, which I bet a lot of people don't realize. I bet you have a lot of friends who, the first time they started recording themselves trying to do stand-up, realized, oh shit, it's totally different for a camera.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not even just different for a camera. It's just hard to record stand-up because the audio is the hardest part for stand-up because a lot of times the camera, it's facing you and, you could put on a lapel mic or something, but it's really just capturing your voice. But the audience response is just as important, if not more important than you speaking. So being able to mix those together to make them sound good and cohesive is tough because if you don't catch enough of the audience, the timing of the joke sounds wrong.
I bet it does. In fact, I shouldn't say this, but I won't use names. My ex-wife knew a lot of fairly famous comedians, and one let a fellow comedian do his HBO special, and it was so poorly directed. You took great material, and it just sucked. It sucked. And it was like, dude, I saw that set live, and it was hilarious. And now I'm watching on HBO, and it sucks. Like, I felt so bad for him.
Bad recording can really, really mess up stand-up because there's just so much. It's such a... this is the exact thing of how the pandemic was so difficult for stand-up comedians because, all of these comedians switched to Instagram and Zoom shows doing these live shows. And look, that is possible, right? Like I believe that anything could be funny. There is a vehicle for comedy in everything. So it's totally possible, and there were some comedians that were doing some really exciting things. A great example is a good friend of mine, Danny Jollis, who actually does the voice Or you, I don't know if you see him in She Used to Laugh, but he was the MC in the club.
I recall the MC.
Yeah. He does this really great joke at the top, which totally sets up the film. It was great, and I didn't write that line for him. I just said, just do some of your material to warm up the audience, and whatever we catch, because I didn't want to over direct his part of that. But to get back to what I was saying, he did this really cool thing during the pandemic where he would do Zoom shows. But he would set his background of his Zoom to be a green screen, but he would play a video as his background, and the video of his background was his actual house. So it looked like he was just sitting in his room, but behind him was actually a video. And then at one point, he walked out of the room and then walked in from a completely different direction. And then at one point, he was on the screen with himself. He just kind of coordinated this fun, weird and it was hilarious because no one was expecting it, and it was such a creative way to use the medium.
Yeah, the medium of Zoom. Yeah,
right.
That's so creative.
And I think that's really what's the most important. If you when you shoot stand up, and this is something I learned doing this movie, is don't shoot stand up cinematically or for a narrative piece to look like stand-up. Shoot it like a movie. You're making a movie. It's a visual medium. Use the tools you have to your advantage. We shot She Used to Laugh very close. I mean, I had my DP, Nick Murphy, who's incredibly talented, a really great kind of fly-on-the-wall sort of documentary style, cool art house director and cinematographer, and he did such a great job of kind of that shaky sort of close, focus in and out feeling that gave the stand-up a whole different layer of complexity. And that's something that you can really only achieve through filmmaking, right? And, stand-up is a live performance first and foremost. That's where it is best consumed. And these days, a lot of stand-up is starting to move to like Instagram and TikTok, where people are posting little 60-second clips of their stand-up, and that's fine. There's a good way to do that, and it's, I'm never going to be the guy who bemoans the evolution of entertainment. Entertainment is always evolving. The way that we consume entertainment is always evolving. And so it's important to move with the times or get left behind. You can sit and bitch about it all you want, but in the end, this is what's happening. So either join them or don't. But I still believe that that's not the best way to consume stand-up. I still believe that live, in person, is the best way to consume it. And so if you put it on another medium in the way that I did in this movie, in the way that some people do with Instagram or TikTok, be conscious of it. Be conscious of your medium and use the tools available to you for that medium. You might as well. They're available.
You did, and I'm tempted to comment on how well you used it because I have things in my mind to share, but I want to jump back. I want to jump back to your youth and what led you into comedy, what led you into filmmaking. I don't know filmmaking, if you were interested in film even before comedy, if you were always a creative person. I think everyone should be aware that stand-up comedians are writers. You're writing, so maybe you were writing as a kid. So go ahead, jump back. And actually, I believe I know where you're from, but you want to say where you come from?
Yeah, I was originally born in Ukraine, and I moved to America with my family in 1998. We were religious refugees seeking asylum in America because there was quite a bit of anti-Semitism in Ukraine. And we were lucky enough, my father's sister, my aunt, was already here in a similar situation as a refugee. And then once your family's here, you can call over people from your life, and they have to be immediate family. So she called over her brother, which was my family. So we moved to Minnesota, of all places. You come to America and you just go to the middle of the Midwest, and it was a great place to grow up. I mean, cold, but awesome. It was a nice, and there's a really great creative community in Minneapolis. It's a vibrant city of music and rap. Atmosphere. There's a lot of different rappers that have come from, Lizzo is from Minnesota, and a really great stand-up scene. Fun filmmaking scene. The MISPIF, Minneapolis St. Paul International Film Festival, super cool. Now there's another one as well. So, vibrant art community. But for me, I think I've always been really interested in performance. I mean, I have pictures of me as like a 4 or 5 year old in Ukraine doing like recitals at my daycare in Ukraine. And I was really into magic. I was really into David Copperfield. My dad bought me like a VHS tape, and by we, I'm talking about the entire city that I lived in, just got VHS in like 1996. We were like, oh man, look at this. And my dad somehow procured a VHS player and somehow got me a David Copperfield tape. So I was obsessed. And my parents were like, let's go to America. They were moving for, their reasons, but they told me as a 6-year-old, they were like, we're going to America so that you can one day perform with David Copperfield. You can go work with him. And I was like, oh, amazing. And then I, got to America and realized that was a lie.
but a good one. I mean, honestly, that's an inspiring kind of lie. Because, you can't explain to a child why you have to escape persecution.
Right. But, and it's funny because I think for a while I did believe that was going to happen. Then eventually it dawned on me that was not the case. And to this day, I think I've never actually met David Copperfield. I had one chance to go to his show. My aunt bought me some tickets, but the night that show was happening, I had a show. And so I couldn't go to his show and maybe meet him because I had my own show. And what a poetic reason to not go, And I think to this day, if I met him, I think it'd be kind of an emotional experience because it's been such a thing in my life. But that's how I got into everything. I was a magician first. I started doing magic professionally probably middle school. My dad would drive me around to daycares and family friends, and I would perform at birthday parties and charge like $100 for a show.
Which is actually good money for a kid.
For a middle schooler, sure, yeah. So that was fun, and I started like buying the equipment. And then I got a dove when I was in high school, like an actual dove, and I started doing more stage magic, and that really helped me book more kindergarten and preschool and daycare shows because now I had an animal that the kids could pet afterwards. And during high school, I was making good money during the summer just doing all the daycares. And
were you pure magic, or did you work some comedy in?
I think magic has always, and this is kind of, this kind of leads me to the next piece of it, but I think magic has always just been a vehicle for me to be funny. I think I loved magic. I think magic is a really fun and a really interesting kind of performance. What a cool performance to go on stage and lie to everyone in the audience continuously for an hour. The whole point of magic is to be the best liar and the biggest manipulator. And so what a fun thing to learn psychology and how to get people to not look at certain things, how to get people to understand where because so much of magic happens when you least expect it. And then we magicians specifically divert your attention to what's in the community called the magic moment, which is when you believe magic happened. Most of the time, that magic happened long before that. And so the game of that with the audience, super fun.
And that's a type of screenwriting. Oh,
right.
That is definitely understanding the structure of acts and how to set up a narrative.
Absolutely. And not only that, but it also helps to teach you how to be innovative, because all of magic is really just engineering. I mean, most great magicians are really great tinkerers, inventors, and engineers, because all of those gimmicks and all the things that they create are a means to an end. You sit down and you go, I want to make this ball float without anyone knowing. How could I do that? And then you start working backwards and figuring, okay, well, if I put this like this here and cover it with this in a way, the audience won't see that because it'll be hidden by this. And if I just stand the right way, it'll look like it's floating. And that's what a lot of magic is. And I think slowly as I was doing magic, I was starting to realize that I didn't really have that side of it as much as other magicians. It wasn't in me to create new magic effects. I just really loved buying a magic trick, having it already be created, and then I would perform it. And that worked for a while. But then eventually I got to a place where I started to feel very uncreative because I just felt like I was doing what other people had already invented and done. And yeah, sure, the talking was mine and the story that I was telling with the trick was mine. But the trick wasn't mine. And then, I don't know, when I was in high school, YouTube started becoming a thing and the internet started becoming a bigger thing. And once YouTube happened, a lot of people started revealing magic tricks online. And that sucked because, sometimes you spend a year or 2 years learning one trick and really perfecting it to the point where it looks incredible. Like an ambitious card routine. Any magicians who are listening are like, oh, I know what he's talking about. Or like a Fountain of Rings routine or something like that. And you spend all this time and then someone can just go on YouTube and just find out the secret to it and it just ruins the whole thing. And they'll tell you, wow, but I'm still so impressed with the way that you did it. And they're just saying that to make you feel better. They're not. Once you learn the secret, the magic is gone. It's always gone. So I hated the idea that someone could take away my performance that easily, that someone could just look something up and then suddenly my thing was no longer cool. And the only way against that is to come up with your own magic and your own secrets, but with that, I wasn't doing that. So I realized right around high school that what I really loved wasn't the magic part of it. The magic part of it was just a reason for me to be on stage. What I really liked was making people laugh. And that didn't require any gimmicks. It didn't require any engineering. It just required a notebook and a pen and for me to just have some funny thoughts. And so I just transitioned into stand-up.
Yeah, and you were creating for yourself, so suddenly it was
It was mine.
It was yours. I don't want to say proprietary, but it is. You were creating your own IP in a way.
Right. It's my intellectual property. It's my idea. In stand-up, it's funny because there's a lot of people who talk about like, well, what is a stolen joke? Like if you hear someone who has a similar joke to someone else, was it stolen? Is it parallel thinking? And in stand-up, that happens all the time. Let's be honest. There's a lot of concepts that you've probably heard a lot about. Hey, fast food sucks, right? Or hey, running is boring, and you'll hear people talk about, oh, working out is so hard, I never want to do it. And everyone has a joke about it. But what makes it your joke is how you execute it. And that's what I started learning in stand-up was, and I think that that's part of my magic training too, was that I was always working with known concepts and trying to make them mine. So when I got into stand-up, it felt like I was taking a premise, which is a magic trick that everyone had already invented, and I was taking that premise and I was making it mine.
And did you start getting inspired by professional comedians? Did you get into watching comedy?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, at that point, look, I was in high school. I was obsessed with Dane Cook. I mean, who wasn't obsessed with Dane Cook? Dane Cook was on top of his game. That was like shortly after Harmful If Swallowed, Retaliation. And I was a huge fan of Robin Williams. I had his Broadway special memorized by heart. I loved George Carlin. So I was I was a huge fan of Jim Carrey, and he didn't do as much magic, but he was just so physical in his comedy that, I was drawn to all of that. I loved Adam Sandler. So I was already in that space, and I was like, man, this is what I love. I love these guys essentially doing magic, but with words, because that's kind of what comedy feels like to me. I've read maybe 2 or 3 different books about the psychology of comedy, And to this day, no one has a great theory on why people laugh. There's a lot of theories out there. A lot of them do a good job of explaining what's happening, but none of them are entirely encompassing. No one has figured out the actual key to laughter because it's so contextual. And so that's why stand-up to me feels a lot like magic, because I'm trying to create a reaction using words, and trying to tap in some sort of context in a group of 100 people who all come from a different place and have lived different lives. So how do I find that context? How do I take what turn it on its head, and show you a different version of it that only I can do, only I can come up with? And I think that's another thing that I have really, I've been doing stand-up now for 13 years. There's a caveat to that, right? I started in high school. I did 4 years of college in the middle of that. So, how focused was I really during those 4 years on stand-up?
So you started in high school, but in college, did you focus on school and not?
I did both.
You did both. Yeah. So you did do it the whole time.
Yeah, but it's like with comedy, it's such I don't want to say a grind, but it is. You really got to get stage time. Like if you ask any comedian for advice, they always say the same exact thing: stage time, right. Stage time and right. Stage time and right. There's no other way.
So you were doing that starting in high school, even?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're hitting, I guess, the usual, hitting open mics and stuff.
But I wasn't old enough to go, so I had to call in advance, and I had to work everything out with them. They used to put big X's on my hands so I couldn't drink. But they liked that I was there. It was fun. I was the young kid, But there's definitely a double-edged sword to being the young guy in the comedy community, because stand-up is it can be a very insecure place, because we're all vulnerable on that stage, and it can be very scary. And so what it does is it fosters some insecurity in comedians. I can only say that because I am one of those comedians who is incredibly insecure. I'll be honest. I'll be vulnerable. And it was tough being, this young, impressionable kid, because you have to have a lot of thick skin to do stand-up. And I'm hanging out with all these, in my opinion, adults, people who are 25, 35, 45 years old. And I'm one of their peers. And they teased me endlessly all the time. I got so much tease. Can we swear on this?
Oh, you can absolutely swear.
Oh, okay, good.
No, I
was like in my head, I'm like,
I normally try to curse early. Yeah, this has the explicit warning.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I normally throw in a
I got a lot of shit from a lot of people, and that's fine, because that helped me develop a thick skin early on in my career. But it also was definitely made me feel like I wasn't good enough for a very long time. It becomes very difficult to look at yourself as an expert when every single person around you is telling you that you're some kid who doesn't know anything about anything.
Right. So their egos were forcing them to do put him in his place.
Yes.
Put the kid in his place.
100%.
And you're like, I don't know, man. I went up there and killed.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why you're throwing jabs at me, but you're not old enough to see the big picture.
No, I don't have that kind of self-awareness. And look, I also have to say that I was kind of a piece of shit. Like I was an 18-year-old dumbass. I didn't know how to be like I was professional, but not always. I would do stupid stuff. I would, run my time sometimes, like leave a show when I shouldn't have. Like I've made all the mistakes. And that's the other big problem, was I was so young. I wasn't like a well-developed, responsible individual. I was just some fucking kid. Wow, I love how this podcast suddenly was like, now it's going to be like, it's going to take a turn for swearing land. Like,
beautiful.
Now that I know that I can do it, all of a sudden you guys are going to see my potty mouth come out. But yeah, it was, so I can't deny that I didn't feed into it a little bit, but also everyone was a fucking asshole, like everyone sucks. So like, I was definitely getting a lot more shit than other people were because I was young, and they knew that.
But they're giving themselves each other shit.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just affecting me more because I was young and didn't realize that this is part of the game. So now, it's taken me 10 years because I feel like just within the last few years, I have gotten to an age where I'm like, oh, I know why they're saying that stuff to me. They're threatened. Oh, maybe I am good at this. Maybe I can give myself that truth. Maybe I can give myself a seat at this table finally.
And there wasn't one person who was generous and pulled you aside and said, I think you've got a lot of promise. I think you're really good. Like,
no, there was, I should also say this. As much as they were teasing me, it all came from a place of respect, because they wouldn't have even given me the time of day if they didn't care about me. So in comedy, if people are making fun of you, it means they like you, because they wouldn't do that if they didn't. It's too close to home. Like, if you actually hate someone, you don't insult them to their face, because then it's like, oh, then you're just being a real dick. So that teasing, to me, was actually their way of showing me that they like me, that they believe in me.
Acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were one of the guys.
And people took me on the road with them, and they gave me chances. And even when I fucked up, they would definitely punish me, but see that I've changed. They would see the growth, and they would give me more chances. So, I say it like, oh man, I was a kid and everyone shit on me. But like, I think it was all a good thing. Like, if I went back, I would have done all of it again the same way. Maybe I would have been a little bit less of a dumbass. But you know what? I was young. I did stupid stuff. It's good. I learned my lessons.
It's impossible for even the smartest young people do dumb shit. But so let's get into college. So college comes along, and I'll hint at were you interested in film at all, or solely performance?
No, I was, and right around college, I started acting because I was like, well, I'm doing stand up. And, I started to meet other comedians who are repped by the local agencies in Minneapolis, More Creative. Huge shout out to More Creative Talent Agency. They were my first agency, and they took me in, and I am so grateful to them. They really started my acting career. They took a chance on me. I had nothing when I signed with them, other than I showed up to More Creative. The first time I met them, I showed up in like this professional pinstripe suit, thinking, like I was going to a job interview, and they're like, what are you doing? This isn't what acting is. Acting is, you can wear whatever. That's how this works. We want you to be eccentric, not like a business suit and tie guy. Cause that's what I went to school for. I have 2 degrees in marketing and management information systems. So I went to school for business, like wear a suit, be professional, and then I found myself in the acting world, and everyone's like, paint your nails, do something crazy, So, I started acting in college, and look, I think as far as film is concerned, I've always loved making little videos. Even in elementary and middle school, me and my friends used to make little, like, my buddy had an old like camcorder, and we used to shoot little movies. I remember we did one called The Dead Don't Sweat, and we all,
that's a good title.
I know. I think my dad came up with it, but it was, we only shot the opening scene, but it was cool. It was like, we did this really creative thing where I think I was behind the camera, and then, my friends ran across the screen, and he killed one guy, and then turned to me and goes, why did you film this? And then he comes at me, and then you don't see it, but all of a sudden you hear the noises. And then, I fell on the ground and purposely dropped the camera kind of in front of my face, like sort of Blair Witch Project style, where like, oh, the cameraman's dead now, So we had a good time. I think I've always loved filmmaking, and it just took me a long time to get into it because it's very cost prohibitive.
Oh my God. Compared to comedy, right? My God,
Night
comedy, you just work on your material and you test it on stage and you're done. Yeah, whereas if you have an idea for a short film,
years, potentially.
Years,
yeah.
Especially if you come up with an unfortunately complicated idea.
Right.
All All right. So, and in college, any theater stuff there, or you just focused on
doing business and stand up? I was in a fraternity. You know, I was just like doing my college thing.
So, as a college student, that's pretty cool. I always love it when someone has like their full artistic side,
right?
But then nothing against acting degrees and theater degrees and film degrees, but I kind of like when college is like focused on like, you know, the fail safe, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it was my fail safe initially, but now looking back at what I did in college to what I'm doing now, I feel like I got a degree in the entertainment industry because the things that I learned as far as marketing is concerned, like management information systems, has been invaluable. I would recommend that major to anyone in college. It's essentially just business IT. But what it does is it teaches you how to integrate technology into like a business setting. So my stand-up stuff, very integrated in the sense that like I have a specific way that I manage my bookings. I have a certain way that I manage all of my jokes in certain folders and, you know, project management tools. And I know how to use technology for my advantage, which is something I learned in college. So on top of the fact that it's been a really great way for me to make money, because comedy is not easy to pay the bills with, neither is acting. It's been a great way for me to be flexible, make money, but also it's been so helpful as far as my my comedy career.
Cool. All right. So obviously you graduate.
Yep.
And you did get to tour with some people and open, sounded like. So at what point do you move out to a coast?
Well, I was doing pretty well in stand-up by that time. You know, this is 6 years in or so, because I started my maybe junior, senior year of high school, so all through college. So 5 or 6 years in, I'm featuring pretty regularly in the Midwest, just like the Wisconsin clubs, the Minnesota, the North to South Dakotas. I do that. I've been to Iowa, you know, those, just the main area where I wasn't really flying there, but I was starting to branch out. I was starting to headline, which is that 45-minute, 60-minute spot. And right around that time, I booked my first sort of big thing on ABC. I played this farmer named Eric Baker, it was like a docudrama, and it was called In an Instant, Buried Alive. And it was kind of a reenactment show of people who almost died but survived. And I was this Iowa farmer who almost died in a corn silo, who got like buried, and then they rescued him. And so that was on ABC, and I was the lead, and that was cool. And
they came out to Minnesota to
they shot it in Minnesota.
So they cast it locally, which is very cool.
Committee Films, and I actually owe them a debt of gratitude, because they were so incredible, and I'm still friends with most of the people that were a part of that project, because it was so monumental for me. And then
you were exposed to professional film crew.
Yeah, I was there. I was doing it. I was doing the thing I wanted to do. And then shortly after that, I flew to Chicago for an audition to go audition for Chicago PD, which was, you know, any person in Los Angeles who's listening is going to be like, you flew to another city for an audition? No one would do that, because it's such a crapshoot. There's, you know, like, to spend money on a plane ticket to just go do an audition is it's a big, big risk. It could pay off, but it's a big risk. So I actually flew out there to audition for Chicago Fire, did my audition. I don't think I booked it. And I was sitting there going like, oh my God, did I just waste all this money? I mean, I'm like just out of college. I'm not like doing well. I'm not buying plane tickets all the time. I'm crashing on couches and all my friends, just trying to get by. And then the casting director, Claire Simon, who I also owe a lot of gratitude to, she didn't book me for Fire, but she happened to have another audition later that day, literally an hour before my flight took off, for Chicago PD. So I went in, did that audition literally with all my luggage in the waiting room. I did that audition, got on the plane, and as I was boarding the plane, I got a call from my agent. She's like, you booked it. You're doing this thing. You're going to fly. Or no, she said I was on check avail, and she's like, they'll tell you the next day if you booked it. And then I came home. a day or two later, they're like, you got it. You got to fly back out to Chicago. So I'm buying another plane ticket now. And then once that happened, I had to join SAG because I had done enough of my waivers. So I joined SAG. And then once you join SAG, there's no point in staying in a small market. There's just not enough work. So I moved out to LA.
Right. So were you, and there's no reason to move to Chicago, is there?
I could have, it wouldn't have been bad, but I'd always wanted to come to LA. And Chicago's got a great stand-up and improv scene, and I met some really cool people there while I was there. But I thought, I don't know, Chicago's still cold. I've been living in Minnesota my whole life. Let's go somewhere like hot.
Not to mention,
exciting.
I've heard many, I'm a big fan. In fact, I think the reason this podcast exists is because I always liked Mark Maron's podcast, WTF. Right. With the long conversations where you really get to hear someone share stuff. And I've always heard all the people say, like, they always think it's better to master your craft outside of LA or New York and then come, instead of come here and then start hitting it and learning, making all your mistakes here.
100%. It's not even about making mistakes or not. It's about access, because in Los Angeles, there's a million open mics every night, and you could get 5 or 6 sets in one night if you wanted to, but you're not really performing for a real crowd. You're performing for other comedians. And so it's not as easy to learn stand-up like with an audio. It's not a natural place for stand-up a lot of times. And so in a smaller market, you just have more access to do real shows in front of real people and do more time. I've been here for 6 years, maybe 7 years. I don't even know. The pandemic made me not understand any kind of time. So
agreed.
I have no idea at this point. But I know that in the time I've been here, it's not very likely to get a 30-minute set in Los Angeles. Oh my God, where are you going to do that? In Minnesota, there's a number of clubs that could happen. And you probably get booked there maybe once, twice a year. So you could really learn between all the clubs. You're probably doing once a month. You're doing a pretty long set. So yeah, starting in a smaller market is great because you get access to real people and real crowds. In LA, on any given night, the Laugh Factory, the Hollywood Improv, the Comedy Store, the Pasadena Ice House, these are big clubs, and the Flappers, they've got a show every night with some pretty famous people. So why would the average comedy consumer go to some indie show when they could go see Bill Burr for $10 at the Laugh Factory? So the only people coming to those indie shows are like the indie comedy fans, people who know comedians, who are swinging by those shows. Because those shows, look, I don't even think that those famous people shows are better than the indie shows. I think there's some incredible comedians that you've probably never heard of, and they're doing all those shows in LA and crushing, right? But people don't know to go check those out. They're not as accessible. So definitely starting in a smaller market is really good. Whenever I talk to someone who started in LA, I'm always so impressed, because your first few years in Los Angeles, I can't imagine just going up night after night at these very difficult open mics and not hearing any laughter. You got to really, really want it to stick around. In Minnesota, I think the first set I ever did, I did well. I mean, I was in front of people and I got some laughs. And as soon as that happens, it's like, trying drugs. You're like, oh, I got to get that. I got to get that again.
For sure. And I guess I should focus on the acting too, because did you train the acting, or was it just natural? Because you were doing stand-up and then you tell me about, you booked the ABC thing, the Dead thing, and then you booked Chicago PD. So obviously you had something. The move out here, was it equally for acting?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I did some I did high school theater and stuff like that. I was also involved in high school speech, which is it's a very specific world, and anyone who knows high school speech will go, oh, I know exactly what he's talking about. And anyone who doesn't has no idea. But it's essentially it's as competitive as debate, right? The debate programs are very competitive, and speech is similar, except instead of debating, you essentially do competitive acting, where you take a written piece, a movie, a book, and you cut it down to 10 minutes and you do all the characters, all the sound effects, all the music yourself. And there's this thing called character popping where you pop between the characters. And it's a very, very cool and fun way to perform. And I did that in high school and was pretty good at it. I was my junior year, I won like all the tournaments. I ended up getting first at one national tournament, and I won that tournament. And then I got fifth at this other national tournament. I mean, when I was 17, I performed at the Cox Pavilion for 3,000 people by myself for 10 minutes. It was the coolest experience of my life. Also the most terrifying because I forgot my line at one point in time and thought I was literally going to shit myself. But I picked it up, finished the piece. It was good. It's fine. But that was also a big part of it. I was like, wow, okay. So I got to the top in this high school world of acting and comedy. Couldn't I do that again in real life? I've already done it once. I could do this again. I mean, it's going to be way harder, but I got to try.
Absolutely. And that explains the question about training. So you did have some training. So
yeah,
for sure.
I mean, I still to this day, the man who was my high school speech coach, Jim Feggi, he taught me comedy. He taught me like what comedy really could be and how you can make comedy out of nothing and the different kinds of comedy and the way that the math of the joke and the timing and all of that stuff. And look, I think I already had a pretty good idea of it just naturally. I was just inclined because I was already doing a lot of magic. I'd already done a lot of performance when I met him. But he really gave me like the tools and the words to understand it. And in fact, he's on my like favorites list. I still talk to him all the time. In fact, I texted him this morning just to tell him that I booked a show. We talk about this all the time. So he's still a major part of my life, and I still talk to him about it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, so you get out to LA, and was it a rough adjustment?
Oh my God. Yeah. It was so hard because it felt like starting over, and like my ego almost couldn't handle that. It was hard because, suddenly I didn't know anyone. I had some friends and, I got some cool opportunities right away. But one of the big things that I realized very early when I got to Los Angeles was I had outgrown my material a little bit and I started to hate it all. I hated all of my material, and I felt like it wasn't right. I felt like it wasn't representative of me. And I had a friend of mine, Amber Justman, who's also from the speech world, another big influence for me as far as she's just a great collaborator. She's a genius when it comes to story structure and narrative. She came out to see me at the Laugh Factory one night, and I remember it so clearly. She was like, Greg, that wasn't you. And those words cut through 6 years of stand-up. And I went, oh my God, she's right. That wasn't me. What am I doing?
Right, you'd outgrown it.
This isn't me anymore. And so I essentially threw it all away. I threw away all of my material, didn't like it anymore. I stopped doing all of it. And it was kind of hard for a while because, suddenly all of my material felt completely brand new and fresh, which is tough when you've been essentially featuring and headlining and suddenly you feel like you're literally brand new, don't know what you're saying into a microphone. And I think that was really hard for me for a while. Like I wasn't doing as much stand-up because it really my brain couldn't wrap itself around, well, what do you do? Who are you on stage? So I really focused at that point on acting and filmmaking and writing because it felt like, look, if I could get myself an agent and a manager, I know that's really hard to do in this city. So let's just focus on those things. And then you know what? If I can book something really awesome, like a small part on Always Sunny in Philadelphia or some funny show, then maybe that would allow me more access to more spaces to do more stand-up, and then I can get back into it when I'm feeling that. And that lasted for a few years, honestly. For a while, I was just in this really weird gray area of uncertainty. I didn't know what I wanted. I started screenwriting and doing a lot of writing, and I really enjoyed it. But then, you suddenly learn, man, everyone's screenwriting. Everyone's got 19 scripts that they want to share with you. And so I was like, okay, well, now I'm just a part of that group. And same with acting. Everyone's acting. Everyone's going to auditions. So suddenly I just felt kind of lost. I mean, and I wrote She Used to Laugh. I think that was the first short film I ever wrote, was She Used to Laugh. And, I'd written a couple other short films since then, and I'd written a couple other like pilots since then. And I was just, I think, for a while, I was not doing nearly as much stand-up as I wanted to. And I started to beat myself up about it. I started to really get down on myself and mean to myself about not doing enough of it, and that I sucked now, and that I don't have any material, and I got nothing to say, and you don't even know who you are on stage. What are you even doing? And it really, really sunk in. And so I just started to focus on some of these other things like filmmaking, and She Used to Laugh was a part of that because it felt like a good way for me to blend stand-up and acting into one thing, one showcase of who I am. And then, it's not until probably a year ago that I really was like, you know what? I've done a lot of acting. I've grown a lot as a writer, because I think that was my big problem. I was always a good performer, but I wasn't a great writer. And I think taking some time away from the performance of stand-up and just focusing on screenplay writing and acting, it helped me to become a better writer. And so about 2 years ago, I really was like, you know what? I'm ready to really go 100 miles an hour in stand-up again, because I feel like I know myself a little better, and I feel like I know who I am a little more, and I could talk about it better on stage. And so I started doing it, started producing my own shows, getting up a lot more frequently, started feeling better, and then I got into a really serious motorcycle accident in January, and that put a big damper on things because I was, for 4 months, couldn't walk. I was just sitting on a couch. I was in a wheelchair. It was really bad. I really broke my knee really intensely. Other things too. I broke my ribs. I broke my collarbone. I was bleeding in my brain. It was a bad.
Yeah.
Bad
sorry to hear it.
I mean, I'm over it now, right? It's all in the past. Everything is good now. I'm pretty much 100% recovered. I still feel my knee a little bit. I'm still dealing with that, but I'm doing a lot better. But that definitely put a big damper on things. But honestly, now on the other end of it, I think I know even more about who I am. I know even more about myself. That accident gave me a whole lot of perspective. And so I feel like even just within the last few months that I've been back at it, my stand-up has changed entirely. And some of that material that I wrote before has changed. Everything is changing. And I'm happy about it. I feel like I'm gaining some momentum. I really feel that.
That must be one of the delightful things about doing stand-up is, unlike your film, you write your film, you shoot it, it's in stasis forever now. Whereas you can rewrite material all you want, and tomorrow you can just try it a different way.
100%.
It can keep evolving with you. Although I want to go back to the film. So you were writing probably feature scripts, and you said pilots and things. Did the idea to write shorts, it just felt like a thing to do? Were you aware of the festival circuit? Were you aware of or the idea of using it, as a piece, proof of concept of your abilities, doing all the behind the camera stuff?
Yeah, I think that short films just felt more accessible. Like I knew that I wasn't going to be able to make a feature-length film that's expensive. And I knew that selling a script when I didn't really have any buzz or any notoriety of any kind was going to be really difficult. I didn't have that many connections. Stand-up I was really frustrated with and struggling with. Acting, I was just doing my auditions, but really not much I could do there as well. And so a short film just felt like, well, this is something I can actually execute. And She Used to Laugh in particular, it's a great story. From the speech world, in high school, I knew a guy named Michael Reynolds who still lives in Minnesota. And I was just messaging him one day. I don't even remember about what. And he goes, hey, a friend of mine, Nick Murphy's moving out to Los Angeles. You guys should grab drinks. I think you'd like them. And I said, absolutely, I would love to do that. So I went and grabbed a drink with Nick at Molly Malone's. I'll remember it like it was yesterday. And loved the guy. We hit it off immediately. He became a very close friend very quickly. He was just such a talented filmmaker, and I loved his work. And so I sent him She Used to Laugh and said, would you read this? Just tell me what you think of it. Like, I feel like we could shoot this pretty easily. What do you think? And I sent it to him, and he loved it. It was totally his style. It was totally up his alley. And he was like, let's do this. And then, of course, we didn't for probably a year or two. We just did whatever, anything other than actually doing the thing we knew we wanted to do. And then finally one day he was like, Craig, let's make this. And I'm always like that. I always need people to give me permission to do anything. I don't know why. I have a hard time and maybe this is from the stand-up, from other things, still working it out in therapy. But I'm always, once someone goes, this is great, you should do this, I feel a lot more ready to make something, which I'm trying to get over, and I'm getting a lot better at that. That's something I'm actively working on, to give myself the permission to do the things I want to do. But in that time, I just needed him to say, let's do it. And I did it. In your
defense, you hadn't made a film before.
Never.
So getting positive feedback from someone would have to be helpful.
Yeah, it felt great.
Have to be.
It felt great. And right around that time was when I was in this acting class at BGB Studio, and I did a scene with Anna Danes, who is the woman who plays Veronica in my in She Used to Laugh. And I remember being in the middle of that scene, in the middle of that class, and as we were doing the scene, I was like, this is her. She's the girl. She is the one for this movie. I have to talk to her after class, and she has to say yes. There's no one else to do this. And she said yes, and we started planning. And once I had her confirmation, I suddenly felt like, in some ways obligated. Not obligated, but now there was accountability. Now there's this girl who's expecting me to send her something, and that maybe we could make it. And suddenly I was like, okay, well, now there's other people relying on me, so I really got to move this forward. And so we did. And, then it just became a matter of logistics. And that was always something I was good at because I have a business degree. So I know how to make some phone calls and schedule some things and call my friends and call in some favors and source some people.
You have a business mind, and I've probably said it too many times, but every film is like a startup.
Yeah.
Right? It's like starting up a business, putting together a team, this and that. And you knew from the beginning that you would direct?
We weren't sure. I think from the beginning, what I was concerned about was how much it was going to cost because it was all my money. So I was like, I can't hire a director. Nick could have done it, the cameraman, but he was so busy running the camera that, I didn't know if that was going to be the way to go. Plus, in my mind, I knew what this thing looked like. I had already seen it in my mind. So I was like, between Nick and I, we got this. And that was that's a relationship that I think, maybe I take for granted, but not my relationship with Nick, but the way that we worked together when we shot that film, because for the actual stand-up portion, I did that set 4, maybe 5 times, and we only had Cantor's, the kibitz room at Cantor's Deli for maybe 3-4 hours. So I didn't have a lot of time. So I didn't have time to review it after every take. I just had to do it. And so what we would do is I would run it once and I would look at Nick and go, what did we get? And he goes, I think we got a lot of great stuff at the beginning from this joke to this joke. So let's do it again. I'm going to shoot all of it, but I'm really going to focus on the second half of that set. So really, that's where I'm going to be. And then, he would do it and I wouldn't watch any of the footage. I was just like, what do we get? What do you think? And he goes, great, let's do another one. And this time, get loose with it. Improv some stuff. Say whatever you want because we've got some really great footage of what you wrote. Now let's see what we can get from the moment.
And he was aware how to change his shots from set to set so that in the editing room you would have choices.
Yeah. He was doing a really good job of making sure that, if he was tight during a section in one time, he'd go out on another time so that I would have the cut back and forths. But, when you watch the movie, you'll see that a lot of it's really tight, and that ends up working really well because it feels so intimate. Like it's not nearly as funny as stand-up is. It doesn't feel as comedic because of how dramatically it's shot. But I love it. I think it works really well. And when I the exciting part was taking the footage home and going like, oh my God, wow, look what we got. Because I had not seen it until he passed me the footage.
And did you shoot that? Did you shot the kibitz room before you shot the apartment stuff?
All of that. Yeah. The kibitz room. So the other funny thing was, Anna, got pregnant, during that time, and she called me, and I think we hadn't shot anything yet, and she called me. She's like, Greg, I'm pregnant, and it's going to show probably by the time we shoot. If you want to rebook me, that's okay. I completely understand. I'm like, oh my God, no, this is the coolest thing ever. This is going to up the stakes so much. I would love to use it if you're okay with it. And she's like, absolutely. Why not? This is great. So we shot the kibitz room first. We thought that we were going to put her in the audience and then, every now and then cut to the audience and you could kind of see her in the back, which would have made it kind of very spooky and interesting. We ended up cutting that. It didn't work. And then after we shot the kibitz room, I think we waited. I think we did the apartment stuff right away. And then we waited a month or two for her to really start showing before we shot the final scene where she had to be very clearly pregnant. And the way that we did that, I'm so happy with how it turned out, because every time I've watched that film with anyone, there's a gasp every time they see her stomach. And I'm like, wow, what a cool, dramatic moment that we just stumbled into and just worked with and let it be what it is.
And to support you further, you didn't completely, she offered it. And then besides taking advantage of it, you truly took advantage of it, because with that wait for her to show more, that's exactly what you knew the audience needed. Because it is such an interesting piece. And we're not really spoiling anything, which is nice.
Right.
But because if and when people can see this, it'll be in the show notes. I promise it'll be in the show notes. You really should see this movie. But because the stand-up is truly funny, but with the inner cuts, with the home life and the
right.
The jokes are about the home life, and you see such a special film, because instead of just writing a performance film, you wrote a film that really shows how the sadness of life can be used for humor, but it doesn't stop being sad.
No.
And that pregnancy, wow. Yeah. I will never forget that first reveal.
Yeah. And it worked. I mean, it worked better than I could have imagined. And I remember when we were editing it, because when we edited it, I did the first pass and I got like a 15-minute cut of it. And then I sent it to Nick and I'm like, I don't know how to cut 5 minutes off of this. What can you do? And he got creative with it, and he's so good at that. And I remember when we had the final 10-minute cut, I was like, are we being too subtle? I want to make sure people notice it, but I don't want to hit them in the face with it. It has to be just subtle enough that you catch it, but it's not the main focal point of that scene, because it's not the main focal point of that scene. So yeah, the film was always meant to show the duality of the comedic experience. And it was always meant to show how comedians are sometimes an unreliable narrator. And when you're sitting in an audience and you're hearing these jokes and you're having a blast and having a wonderful time, the comedian is using comedy to try to deal with these things in their life. It's them explaining how they see it and feel it, leaving out the details that are a little too revealing. And so what I was hoping is, I wanted there to be two audiences in this movie, the audience in the room and the audience at home watching the movie. And they were having a very different experience.
Completely different. And that depth and subtlety, I think really, that is why you won awards, right? Because it's so, there's so much depth to it. So bravo.
Thank you.
And did it inspire you? Like, are you saying to yourself, shit, I got to do more like this? Or is it because film is so fucking hard to pull off? Because, I mean, your first film came out this well. So, you know, as a festival program, I sure as shit would like to see more.
Well, you know, I have a short film script that I wrote that I love, and it would not be very difficult to shoot. I think I could shoot the whole thing in a weekend. And I have a location in mind, and if it's not that location, I could find something else. Like, I know I've got this thing. The hard thing for me right now is where to put my attention. You know, I have only so many hours in a day, and I think I've always kind of been a bit of a jack of all trades kind of guy. Like, I really love to just learn hobbies, you know, like I play a little guitar, I sing a little bit, I act, I'm a stand-up comic, I do writing, I do filmmaking. When I got into that motorcycle accident, I started drawing because I was just laid up for 4 months. And now I love drawing tattoo art, and I'm considering getting a tattoo apprenticeship. Why not? What a cool thing to explore. I am inspired by art. The medium is whatever is best for the emotion I'm trying to convey. If it's something that's better drawn, cool. If it's something that's better for stand-up, great. If it's something that's better for sketch or film, great. But it's the idea that drives me, and the medium is I get to be choosy as to which medium I produce it in, because luckily I've been lucky enough to have the time and the ability and the privilege to develop so many different sort of avenues for creativity. Yeah,
absolutely.
And so now I'm sitting here, you know, would love to make another short film. I think it'd be super fun. I have this short film script that I love, and I would love to shoot it, you know, but I'm sitting here going, is that what I should spend my time doing? There's a million people in this city who are just filmmakers, who are spending all their time writing scripts, shooting them, you know, going to networking events, going to festivals, learning about all that stuff. I'm never going to beat those people out because I'm splitting my time between that and stand-up and acting and writing and drawing now, right? So I'm just trying to, at this point, you know, I hate to say this because I feel like it's going to sound pretentious or like I'm bragging, but one of the problems of being good at a lot of things is that you never really know what to do with yourself. You know, I have a friend, John Hannibal. He goes by Hannibal. He's an incredible musician. And when John wants to be creative, he sits down and he writes a song. And it's the same every time. He opens up Ableton on his computer and he starts messing around with tunes and he starts singing and he starts producing music. So it always looks kind of the same for him. I mean, and I don't know that. I don't want to say that, you know, I don't want to simplify what he does, because what he does is incredible. I can't imagine writing a song. My brain doesn't work like that. I could write you a joke all day long. A song I can't do. But that's what creativity looks like to him, is he sits down and does one thing and he can really get so meticulously good at that one thing. But because I do so many things, whenever I have time to be creative, I never know which thing to choose. What should I choose?
I get it. I've always been a master of none.
Right.
But I will say, in support of filmmaking, one of the cool things about it is it's so multidisciplinary, right? You get to act, you get to write, you get to do some other stuff. You even get to use your business mind.
Right.
So it's cool, but it also has that huge motherfucking drawback, which is
money,
time. And you can only ask friends to work for free so many times, right? And pretty amazing you got the kibitz room, actually.
That was actually really easy. I just stopped by one time and I asked to talk to someone who could help me, and I was like, I'll do it whenever you're not using it. I'll do it bright in the morning. Luckily the kibitz room can be blacked out, so it doesn't look like it's during the day. It looks like it's nighttime. They gave it to me for an incredibly reasonable price. The people who own Cantors are so sweet, and I'm so thankful for them. They were very, very nice.
For those who don't know, the kibitz room is the little bar attached to Cantor's Deli on Fairfax in LA. I used to live walking distance from there for years.
And it's legendary.
It's
Huge bands. I think like Guns N' Roses and like Red Hot Chili Peppers have played there. Yeah.
No, it's Cantor's. Cantor's is kind of LA's hardcore Jewish deli, right?
Yeah.
Like there's other delis that
Greenblatt's and a couple others.
They have reputations, whatever. I think Nate and Al's closed, but Cantor's is like
big.
Yeah. And I mean, I say that as a guy whose Jewish grandparents lived a block from there, or 2 blocks. Like Cantor's holds a special spot in my heart.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. So it was very cool you were there.
Yeah, it was special. It felt nice to be, I'm Jewish, and it felt good to be a part of that community, and to spotlight this cool venue at this, not that they need it. Everyone knows the Kibbutz Room, but it was just nice to be there instead of some random theater,
No, that's incredibly cool. That's super cool.
It was another big part of it. So overall, the experience with She Used to Laugh was incredible. I think one of the big things that it did was it showed me that the most important thing with creating is just the action. You just got to do it. And you hear that advice so much and it sounds so trite, but it's so true. You spend all this time planning and thinking, and it never really comes together until you just do it. You just show up, you make a phone call, you pick a day, and you make it happen on that day. And you do whatever you can, and you get whatever you get, and then you make the best with whatever you got. That's it. And that's part of like what makes art so beautiful and so ephemeral, is that it's never exactly how you planned, ever. It's always a shade of what you thought it was going to look like. And the hope is that by the end, whatever that shade is, it surprises you. I mean, I think that's my favorite thing about stand-up and about acting and about drawing and everything and writing, is when you sit down with a script and you're writing a scene and you're like, man, I didn't really know where I was going to go with this. Let's just see what these characters do if I take them to this house. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I had never thought of how funny that could be. And now it becomes like your favorite thing. Same with stand-up. I write these jokes and I go and do them. And then sometimes you're, in the middle of a bit and someone says something in the audience and you respond to it. And now you're kind of doing a little back and forth and you open up a whole new direction for the joke accidentally that becomes a part of it. I have a joke that I wrote about how I really hate spiders. I wrote this joke years ago. I've been doing it 4 or 5 years. And I feel like just recently, within the last couple of months, I finally finished it. I finally figured out what the joke is, what the idea was, why I wrote it, why I thought it was funny. And now it's like a 10-minute section about spiders. But it means so much more to me now. And so, that's kind of, I think, the big experience that I take away from filmmaking. And I'm not stepping away from it. I want to do it. I love it. I love being in control of a project. I don't love being just a cog in a machine, because I don't know. I'm very specific and I'm super judgy and I'm very catty and bitchy. And so I sit there and think of all the things that I would have done differently. But when it's my project, I get to do those things. I get to have that control. I get to exert it. And I think that's why I love stand-up, because I get all the creative control. I get to do all the things I want to do. No one's telling me how to tell jokes. I get to do it.
100%. And you're talking about when you get cast in things and you are acting in something else. Yeah, you're not knocking it. You're not saying you feel like a cog, but
no.
But you're paying attention. You're saying, I know how I would do it.
Yeah, you're kind of a small piece, and you don't want to step on people's toes. And if the director tells you to do a thing and maybe you would have done it differently, I'll pitch it. I'll say, hey, I'm just thinking, from my perspective, this is how it feels to me as the character, but you tell me what you would like and I will do that thing. Because another big thing that I've learned in the time that I've been in LA is being reliable and being directable are so important. That's the stuff that people book you for, is being the guy that shows up and listens and not just does their own thing.
100%. And it's going well?
Yeah. I mean, I'm great at taking direction. I love feedback. And I think maybe that comes from the fact that, I spent most of the beginning of my stand-up career getting a whole lot of feedback from a whole lot of comedians, and I learned to be okay with it, and that it doesn't, It doesn't necessarily reflect who I am. I mean, I'm definitely prone to take notes a little more seriously than I need to. Like, unfortunately, I frequently defer to people's expertise for some reason because I assume that I don't know everything. As an artist, I'm like, how could I know everything? I don't know anything. I'm just trying to do whatever I think is interesting. And when people offer me feedback or criticism, I go, oh, that person must know. They must be right. I should listen to this. I should change my project to what they're saying. And I always have to pull myself back and go, well, okay, but that's just their opinion. That's just their taste. And that's okay. In fact, one of the most beautiful things Steve Martin said during his masterclass was stand-up comedy is just you sharing your taste with the audience, which I think is great because it's not about making them laugh. It's about telling them what you think is funny. I've spent 13 years learning about what's funny. Let me tell you what I know is funny and come at it from that perspective. I know, so listen to me.
Absolutely. You just named my comedy hero. I grew up on Steve Martin. I grew up on the Steve Martin records. The reason why my best friend in life is my best friend is because he and I we met in 7th grade and we both had every Steve Martin record memorized. So yeah, we were all about it.
I just listened to his Born Standing Up on audiobook. It's incredible. I mean, the fact that he would take audiences out of comedy clubs and go order sandwiches at fast food places with the entire audience behind him. It's a perfect example of a man who doesn't follow what everyone's doing with comedy. He knew that you could do anything. There's a vehicle. If his vehicle was grabbing people out of the audience, great. Let's make it funny. I think one of the things he always says in his master class is, I want people to laugh like they did when they were kids. That's sort of uncontrollable. I can't stop. This is so silly. I don't know what to do. It doesn't have to all be heady and political, especially during his time. A lot of comedians were very political, very heady. And he was like, fuck it. Let's be silly. Let's be like kids again. So, absolutely.
Yeah, although he was a smart silly, right?
Incredibly smart.
So smart.
It was all satirical.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, cool. Well, that's where you're at, and you're just continuing on all avenues.
Yeah, right now it's really stand-up. Right now I'm really focusing on stand-up, and that side of things. I do want to make another short film. I'm still auditioning. I have a really silly podcast that I do that I started during the pandemic. It's called Greg's Guided Meditations, and what I do is I essentially do 5 to 7 minute long guided meditations in this very guru, hello and welcome to today's guided meditations. But I do them like a late night set. So while I'm telling you, take a deep breath in and breathe out. Don't be an idiot. Just breathe. And so I do this sort of acerbic, sort of angry guru who's telling you to live a better life, but he is clearly struggling. And so I've got about 43 episodes of that out, and I've done some wild stuff.
That's you're building a character, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's this sort of very angry and depressed guru telling people how to live their lives. And, I really get experimental with it. I have one episode that I wrote entirely in iambic pentameter. I have one episode where I fight with the sound guy during the meditation. So I'm like, and now we're going to a beach. And then I had my sound guy put in a really loud beach. And then I go, this beach is a little loud. Maybe a little less of the waves. And then by the end of the episode, we end up fighting and he quits. And then the rest of the episode has no music. I'm just talking into a microphone. I did one where I was talking to my inner child and I actually got a kid to read lines for the other half. And my inner child hated me. So,
and you're writing these or are you improv?
Oh, I write them.
So really that's so cool. You are writing audio stories essentially.
Yeah. I'm essentially writing. It's like a little very relaxing stand-up monologue bit, and they get weird. And so I do every time I try to reinvent myself. I just released one called From the 80s, from the vault in the 80s. So essentially the premise of the episode was I recorded this episode in the 80s and didn't release it until now. And I do all kinds of things like, we all love Michael Jackson. I really hope he doesn't become a pervert. That would really suck. And so there's just a lot of like referential stuff to what we all know now, but wouldn't have known in the 80s.
Excellent. Very cool.
So you can check it out. Greg's Guided Meditations. It's on all the platforms.
Greg's
iTunes,
Guided Meditations.
Spotify.
Yeah. Excellent. I'll grab it. I'll link it.
Great. Thank you.
And I don't know why I'm going to bother saying this, but we had a film at Sherman Oaks Film Festival. I think last year, the year you were there, you probably didn't get to see it, but a guy he actually licensed Steve Martin's Cruel Shoes bit.
Oh, wow.
And went to an animation school here in Sherman Oaks. Actually, in Sherman Oaks, we have a school called Exceptional Minds where they teach 18 to 24-year-old people on the autism spectrum.
Wow.
Learn digital animation because actually they're very good at it.
Sure.
And they end up doing like credits for Marvel movies and
my
shit
God.
because like the attention to detail is what you need.
Yeah.
And so he had them animate Cruel Shoes in this really cool style. And I feel like telling you, I should give you the email of the guy who runs that school because maybe you could animate one of these guided meditations.
Oh my God, that would be a great idea. Absolutely. I would love to do that because they're begging to be animated. They're so surreal that that would be great. Yeah.
We actually, all right, I can say this, and then I'll have you name your website and stuff. There's going to be, if no one knows this yet, I actually know the films that'll be in the Sherman Oaks Film Festival in November. Of course, this podcast is coming out after then. But we haven't announced it to the filmmakers yet, probably this week. But there's one that's a guided meditation of someone in Chicago on the subway, and it goes really ugly with like the bums and stuff.
Cool. Very
fun
cool.
stuff. And it's
Very
animated.
Cool.
I love
animation
is so cool.
I love that.
All right, well, you want to name websites and social media?
Yeah, you can. My website is www.gregberman.com. You can find a lot of information there about what I'm up to. But, a lot of times I'm on Instagram at Berman Comedy, and that's my same handle for TikTok. I don't tweet. I did for a little bit. I've given up on Twitter. So at Berman Comedy is my Instagram and TikTok handle, although I just started TikTok and I think I'm too old for it. I don't get it. But yeah, gregberman.com and at Berman Comedy.
I got to tell you, I am, I think I'm about 20 years older than you, and fuck me, I could not even figure out Twitter. I've got friends my age who do use Twitter, but every time I go on and I'm like, what am I looking for? What am I, I just Instagram I get. Somehow that worked for me.
Right. Right.
I'm with you. TikTok.
It's not even that I don't know how to use it. I understand it as a development, like as a storytelling tool. I just think I'm not cool. I'm not doing it right. Like those kids, they get it. And I think my vibe is wrong. So I'm trying to figure out what the vibe is. And frankly, I think it's because I don't consume enough of the content. I create it without consuming it. So I'm creating what I think is funny, but not what the platform likes.
Yeah, and that platform's a lot about
Very
regurgitation.
specific, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And not even regurgitation, but like reworking, It's almost like a whole platform of like found footage, Like there's a whole I don't even think it's like bad. I think it's really interesting to be able to take what other people have created and do it different and change it. I love that.
It's all cool.
Yeah.
But I don't get it. All right. So,
exactly.
Neither of us get it. All right. Well, I will get us out of here. I will do the closing spiel, as I always refer to it. Thank you for listening. This is the Discover Indie Film Podcast. I hope I pronounced that well enough. Discover Indie Film. There's actually a TV series that was born out of this. And actually, remind me to take your picture before we finish, because I want to get a picture of you with the mic, which Greg is doing right now for himself. I could always ask for that one. Anyway, so go to discoverindiefilm.com to learn more. It's at DIFWins on social media. Please like and subscribe, review and be kind. And I mentioned Greg's film, She Used to Laugh, in both festivals that I program. So if you want to learn more about the Sherman Oaks Film Festival that we hold every November, you can go to ShermanOaksFF.com, and it's at ShermanOaksFF on social media. And the festival we hold every June is Film Invasion Los Angeles. You can learn more about that one if you go to filminvasionla.com, and it's at filminvasionla on social media. And finally, I'll mention, just because I see like 1,500 films a year with these two festivals, and I'm glutton for punishment, I started an extra movie event on April 20th on 4/20 in 2022, and now 2023, we are actually holding THC Cinema. For those of you who can use drugs in a healthy way that's not damaging to yourselves, we get high and we watch amazingly great short films that are great to watch while high. And I have to say, I didn't want to do it again because it lost money. And I'm like, this is like really self-indulgent of me just to throw this amount of money into like sitting with 50, 60 other people to watch movies stoned. But you know what? It was great. And before the lights came up, there was a voice 5 rows behind me that said, this should happen again. I think she said this has to. So anyway, you can go to thccinema.com or at thccinema if you want to learn about that. Trust me, it's fun if you're in LA, and you can use drugs responsibly. I feel like I have to say it that way. All right, Greg Berman, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, it was super fun. All right, thank you everyone for listening.